Guys, so while you see me work on this pencil sketch of a arrangement of a few pieces of fruit that I have in front of me, I'm going to give you 10 tips that are going to help you improve your direct observational drawing or live drawing skills. Tip number 1 is going to be to start with the basics even before you attempt to draw from direct observation. You have to have a good understanding of art fundamentals. So what I mean are elements of art and principles of art. If you don't understand these things and don't have relatively a good amount of practice with them, like actually having attempted to create a composition with the elements and principles of art, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to draw from direct observation. So this is a whole topic in and of itself, but essentially, if you don't know how to create form, if you don't understand volume or perspective, or even anatomy if you're attempting to draw the human figure or a face, or how to create an interesting and aesthetically pleasing composition, it's gonna be very difficult for you to create a finalized piece from direct observation. You have to have a good understanding of how to create effective proportion, how to create a nice balance of the elements that you're working with, how to use your space effectively, and also how to discern the shadows and the lights in whatever it is you're looking at, so that you're able to then render value through shadows and lights. And of course, there's color. I don't recommend going into color until after you have achieved an effective use of value with grayscale or with pencil drawing, and I will get a little bit more into that later. My second tip is going to be to use a frame. You can create one using cardboard the way that I did for this time lapse. So using a frame sort of helps you be less overwhelmed, because sometimes when you're drawing from life, you have all of these things around you or in front of you, and you sort of don't know where to start. By using a frame, you're sort of separating what's going in the picture from what is outside of your picture. And also, I really recommend exploring with your frame in your hands, because with it, you're able to really start exploring composition, arranging your different elements in different ways and moving around in different angles, and keep experimenting until you arrive at something that is aesthetically pleasing and interesting. Tip number 3 is going to be to stick with pencil when you're creating your first direct observational drawings. The reason why I feel this is very valuable is because color brings in a whole nother level of difficulty to drawings or paintings. So this is why I always recommend to get good practice and get effective at creating good tonal value and effective value placement before going into color. Tip number 4 is going to be to try your best to move as little as possible once you have started. So before starting with your drawing, make sure that you have picked a comfortable position, a comfortable seat that is going to allow you to work for as long as you need to. And the reason why this is important is because the more you move, the more your angle at which you're seeing the composition is going to change, and this is going to affect the whole perspective of your drawing. Tip number 5 is going to be to get used to looking at your subject continuously. You should be looking at your subject at least 50% of your entire working time. It's very important that you're drawing what you're actually seeing and not what you think the subject looks like. Tip number 6 is going to be to always, whatever it is you're drawing, make sure that you start with the large shapes and do the details only after your shapes, after your proportions, and after your correct placement within the space is achieved. Make sure always that proportion, shape, and location is correct before you move on to things like shadows and details. Tip number 7 is going to be especially for those who want to get better at drawing realism, and it has to do with the use of lines. Remember that in realist art, there are no lines, there are no visible outlines. Shapes are separated by differences in texture, in color, or in value. Make sure that your lines that you create in your initial sketch are light, because later on, as you start to place your values, these lines should disappear. Tip number 8. Whatever it is you're looking at, you should be able to discern where are the lightest parts and where are the darkest parts and where are the tones in between. You have to make sure that you are placing the values accordingly. Really observe your composition and try to replicate these values in your drawing accordingly. Place the lightest parts only in the lightest parts, the darkest parts only in the darkest parts, and make sure that you create a good range of tones in between. You have to have good practice in creating scales of tone or value. It's important to remember that usually in realism, unless you have very contrasting shadows or dramatic lights in your composition, there's always a gradual change between one tone to the next. Also remember that learning how to place values accordingly is really what's going to give your drawing a sense of form and three-dimensionality. Also remember that learning about value is extremely important. It's very important for you to learn and practice how to place values accordingly, because value is the base behind creating three-dimensionality and form in your piece. Once you start placing your tones and you get into this part of your drawing process, you're going to start noticing how your drawing starts to pop out of your page. The three-dimensionality actually makes it start coming to life. And this is the longest part probably of your whole drawing process. It takes a long time to create values appropriately, and you have to constantly be going back and forth, because once you start setting down your values, you start seeing that some other places that you thought were dark already need to be darkened, and also some places at the end need to be lightened. What I find very helpful is to help myself with my eraser, removing some of the graphite from where I have darkened it too much because of my hand smudging the graphite. So yeah, make sure to use your eraser. Erasers are your friends. Make sure that the lightest parts are kept lightest, because this is really gonna help everything pop out a lot. Tip number 9 is going to be to think about how it is you're going to create detail and texture in your drawing. If you're creating skin is obviously very smooth and doesn't have much texture to it once you have already created your smooth values. But if you're drawing any other type of subject, try to think about how it is you're going to be adding those details before starting to add them in. What kind of mark making are you going to be using? Are you going to be using stippling effects? Are you going to be using lines? Are you going to be using cross-hatching? What is it that you're going to be using to add texture effects to your drawing? And also make sure that you're not going overboard with the darkness of the details and that you're keeping it subtle. In realism, changes are actually very subtle. Our minds are what tells us that things are delineated, but they are not in reality. They don't have lines or outlines. And finally, guys, tip number 10 is going to be to not be afraid of applying your artistic license. So even though we have been talking about replicating what you see through observation, remember that you are the artist and this is your artwork. And once you have good practice sort of learning the rules, you should always try to enhance whatever it is you're doing with your own style and your own ideas. So never be afraid of changing what it is you're seeing and adding your own style to your drawings. In this series, we have been talking about references, and in my perspective, this is also another type of reference. Even though this isn't a photograph that you're using and you're actually drawing something from life, It's just a reference. You're not supposed to copy it directly, and always apply your own ideas to it. Finally, to finish this part up, I'm going to give you a few advantages and disadvantages from drawing from direct observation as opposed to using a photographic reference. So some advantages of drawing from life is that it's more challenging, and this means that you're gonna get more growth overall. There is no way of cheating. You're not gonna be able to trace. Also, there's more of a chance that your piece will be unique. Probably your artwork is going to be more rich than using a photograph because you're able to experience the subject first-handedly. If you're drawing a piece of fruit, you're able to touch it, you're able to smell it, and you're able to see the colors in reality, how they look like. If you're drawing a specific place, you're able to feel the energy of how it is to actually be inside of the place. If you're drawing a person, you're actually able to experience the personality, and all of these things are going to enhance your drawing. Some disadvantages of drawing or painting from direct observation are that you probably are going to have to spend some money to pay for your model, or to go to a certain place, or to buy a specific object to draw or paint. Another disadvantage is that people and animals move, so you have to be smart and maybe even quicker to draw or to paint. Probably you're going to have to schedule in time to finish the piece. Most likely you're going to have to finish it in one sitting. Another disadvantage is that there is going to be a setup process involved, and you're going to need space to place your composition in. And the final one is going to be that you are dependent on weather and light changes. So obviously, guys, it's going to be a lot more practical for you to go ahead and use a photographic reference in a lot of the cases when you are making your drawings or your paintings. My recommendation is going to be to just make time to draw or paint from life whenever you are able to. Okay, everyone, that's the end of the video. I hope you liked it and that you found it helpful. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe if you liked it. I'm going to leave a lot of information about the supplies that I used and different links to my website, social media, and my online shops below, so you can check those out. And I hope to see you back next week. Bye!